Okay. Good evening. We are going to look at chapter 3. Your chapter test can be taken this week. So let's just go over the important uh, areas in your chapter. So the first thing is, and this is on page 67 in your textbook. How do we get someone's attention? We're out in public. How would you get someone's attention with "excuse me" or "pardon me"? And for example, you might want to get someone's attention and ask them, "What time is it?" Okay, so that's what they're trying to show us here. And so let's take a look and see what they give us. So, and let me move right on here to the bottom of page 62. And so how could you call out for someone's attention? And they give us some terms: disculpa, disculpa, or oye. And in Spanish, again, we have two forms. Well, we have more than, we have various forms of you. Tú, which we use when you know somebody, the familiar you. Usted, the you use when you're not familiar with somebody that you're meeting for the first time out in the public. It's more formal, the formal you. And so you might want to call someone's attention in a public setting. If they're friends or family, you're going to use the tú form. And you could say, disculpa, there it is, excuse me. Or you could say, oye, oye is from the verb to hear or listen. Okay, it's kind of hear me or hear this. Either one, disculpa or oye. If you're going to approach somebody and use the formal you, someone you don't know, for example, you're someone where there's some social distance, then you would say disculpe or oiga, and they would like you to be aware of that. Now, there's a plural you. What if you want to say, excuse me, and there's a few people around, and you're going to ask them the time or ask them something? Then you use the plural you form, and there it is, disculpen, disculpen. Or if you're going to use oír, you could say oigan. All right, so oigan, señores. Disculpen, señores. All right. And then while we're at it, chapter 3 taught us about the time. There's the question or the way you would ask the time. You should all know how to ask the time and answer a time question. To ask what time is it, you would ask ¿Qué hora es? There it is. And you should know how to respond. ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? And here they answer, son las 5. It's 5 o'clock. But let's move on. So we learned how to call attention when we're calling attention using the informal you, tú, the formal you, usted, or the plural you, ustedes. So let's move on here. And let me see. Okay. All right. So, and let me go back here. So now we're at the top of page 68. So we've learned how to call someone's attention. We've learned the way to ask, what time is it? I mean, you can go over this, ¿Qué hora es? Let's say use the word hora for time or hour. It's feminine and singular. ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? And then they give the time, son las 5. Let's learn how to express the time or tell the time. You need to know how to use the verb ser. We all do. We should all be able to conjugate the verb ser in the present tense. And there's two forms of ser we're going to use when giving the time in the present tense, which is normally the way we're going to do it. If it is 1 o'clock, or any combination of 1 o'clock, we're going, and somebody asks you, what time is it? The way you give the time is you respond back with S. S, and S means it is. Remember, there's no subject pronoun for it. You just conjugate the third person singular form of the verb, which is S, the LA form, Es means it is. And now you want to give me the time. You want to tell me that it's 1 o'clock. How do you say 1 o'clock? Well, in Spanish, this is the way you say it. You have to have the definite article, la, okay? So we're saying it is, la means the, and then you give 1, okay? Now, the normal way we say 1 in Spanish is uno, but we cannot use uno here. We have to use the feminine form of uno, and that's una. Una. Remember, the number 1 is one of those words that has a masculine and feminine form. For whatever reason, numbers generally don't, but in this case they do. All right, so we would answer to say it's 1 o'clock. You would say es la una. All right. Now, why do we say la una? In Spanish, when you give the time, you must give the definite article, and it's going to be la, and then you give the digit. Okay, so in this case, it's 1. Es la una. It is the 1. You would never, in English, you don't need the, but in Spanish, you do need it. Otherwise, it's wrong. So if you want to say it's 1, you don't say es una. That makes no sense. You have to say es la una. You need that definite article. Finally, why do we use la una? Because we're talking about horas or hours. Hora is feminine. So, es la una hora. But they rarely say hora after they give the digit. Okay, they just don't say it. But that is why you use la una hora. Okay, your the has to be the feminine the, and your 1 has to be the feminine the. All right, so the only way to say it is 1 o'clock is es la una. It's not masculine, and that's the only way. And you need the definite article la. Many non-Spanish speakers err and leave out either the definite article or they'll make the number 1 masculine. Wrong. Okay. For every other time from 2 to 12, now, how do you give the time? So if somebody asks you que hora es and it's 2 o'clock, you would answer back with son, not es, but son. And son is the plural form, the third person plural form. Now, why do we answer back with son? Because we're talking about more than 1 hour, many hours. So you answer back son. Literally, they are. Son. Now you need the. So if it's 2 o'clock, I have to say son. Now the definite article. Horas is feminine and plural, so the definite article has to be las. And then I give the digit. So it is 2 o'clock becomes son las dos. It is 3 o'clock becomes son las tres. It is 5 o'clock, son las cinco, up until it is 12 o'clock would be son las doce. Everybody understand it? So es is the conjugation of ser we use with 1 o'clock. Son we use with all other times from 2 to 12 when we're telling the time on the clock right now. Okay. So if somebody asks you what time is it, que hora es, and let's say it's noon, you could say es mediodía. That's one way to say noon. They give it to you here. Or normally people say son las 12, right? It's 12 o'clock del día. Son las 12 del día. That's usually the way I say it. Okay, but either one, es mediodía or son las 12 del día. What about midnight? You could say es media noche, half night, or you could say son las 12 de la noche. Okay, so again, there's just 2 ways to say it. All right, what if it's half past the hour? So let's say it's 1 o'clock. You can either say it is 1:30 or it is 1:30. Okay. And the idea here is you use the word e, which is a y, and it means and, okay? So you add on minutes when you're using time with the word e. So let's see how you'd say it is 1:30. You would say, or it's 1:30, es la 1:30, or es la 1:30, being 30 minutes. Very simple. You could do quarter past. It might be 1:15, es la 1:15, or es la 1:15. And cuarto is a quarter hour. Don't confuse it with cuatro, which is 4. Okay. How do you tell the time again? So if somebody asks you what time it is, and from 2 to 12, you would answer back with son. So let's say it's 6:45. So you would say, ¿qué hora es? And then you'd answer back, son. Then las, you've always got to have las. Seis, your digit, it's 6. And now it's 6:45. Y, you add on the minutes, y 45. Okay. And the book gives you another way also to give the time. You can, for 1:45, you could, I'm sorry, let's say 2:45. How would you say 2:45? You would say, son las 2:45. But there is another way to say it, and the book teaches you that you can use the preposition para, okay? And para can mean to or toward. So if it is 2:45, it's actually 15 to 3. So you could say son las 2:45, or you could say son, and then you give the minutes. Son 15, it's 15 to para las 3. I wouldn't worry so much for that last one, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay, real quickly, basic phrases you should know in Spanish. How do you distinguish AM and PM? So if you're talking about something that's going on in the morning from like 6 a.m. up until noon, it would be de la mañana. So you could say son las 10 de la mañana. But if it's in the evening from 6 to, let's say, 12, it's de la noche. Son las 9 de la noche. It's 9 in the evening or 9 at night. If it's in the afternoon from noon to 6, so let's say it's 4 in the afternoon, son las 4 de la tarde. And if it's in the real early morning, like 2 in the early morning, you would say son las 2 de la madrugada. Okay, but you should know de la mañana in the morning, de la noche in the evening, and de la tarde in the afternoon. Okay. So just make sure you're aware of those uses. Okay. Now on page 69, there is a very important secondary lesson when working with time. This is going to be on your test. I do have a video lecture posted on this in Module 3. Please go through it. In addition to the question, ¿qué hora es?, which everyone should know now means, what time is it right now on the clock? There's another question, ¿a qué hora es?, and it's totally different. Pay attention, because there's distinctions here that we don't make in English. Look at that word, ¿a qué hora es?. A means, in this case, at. So it's asking, at what time is it? It doesn't care what time it is on the clock. It just wants to know, at what time is it? Is the event a class, a game, a church service? So this is how you would ask, what time is an event? In English, we don't make this distinction. We would just say, what time is the class? What time is the church service? Not in Spanish. We say, at what time is the event? At what time is the church service? At what time is the class? It's a big difference. You're going to be asked this question on your exam. Pay attention, and you should do very well. And it's part of just knowing Spanish. So let's take a quick look. So to ask what time something happens, say or ask a qué hora. Okay. And you see that there's an a in the question. When you want to answer an a qué hora question or a qué hora es question, you answer back with an a. If there's no a in your answer, it's wrong. Okay. So let's take a look at the example they give us here. ¿A qué hora es la clase de español? At what time is Spanish class? Look at how they answer back. Es, what does es mean? Es means it is, or you could say la clase es or es. And then how do you give the time? You say a las 10. You have to have a at and 10 o'clock. And the only way we can say 10 o'clock in Spanish is to say the 10. So we have to have the definite article. It has to be las, the feminine plural one. So es a las 10. So a qué hora es la clase? What time is the class? In English, we don't say at what time is class. We could, but we usually don't. In Spanish, you have to have it. And how would you answer back? In English, you would say it is at. Same in Spanish. It is es, a, and then give me the time. The definite article, las, and then the digit, whatever it is. If it's at 11, es a las 11. If it's at 11:30, es a las 11:30. If it's at 11:45, es a las 11:45. Very simple. Here's a few vocabulary words you might want to know. El horario from hora means schedule. Okay. El horario de Ana, Anna's schedule. Okay. Here's some good vocab. Siempre means always. Una vez means once. Dos veces, twice. Okay, let's move on. Let's see. Okay, let me see. Let me see. And again, be able to answer questions with a que hora and even other verbs, okay? So here we have a question in D. Okay, I just wanted to point it out. You can go through these on your own, page 70. ¿A qué hora abre? You should know that the verb, that abre is a form of the verb abrir, and it means to open. It's part of our vocabulary. So ¿a qué hora abre? At what time does it open? So you could say ¿a qué hora abre la biblioteca? What time does the library open? ¿A qué hora abre la tienda? What time does the store open? Say that the library opens at 6. You could say la biblioteca abre a las 6. Again, if you're asked a question with a que, you have to answer back with a. So be aware of that and look at some of those exercises. Okay, let's see. Give me a second here. Okay. Now let's look at some vocabulary. Okay, so the vocabulary of chapter 3, familiarize yourself. You've had plenty of time, and if you've had Spanish before, a lot of these phrases you know. Look at the different verbs, verb actions. These are just basic activities, sports activities, daily activities like dining, sleeping, things that activities that you would partake of. You need to be able to talk now about yourself and talk about others. So look at these basic daily activities. And here's the question: ¿Cómo es tu rutina diaria? What is your daily routine like? So you want to talk about the things you like to do. And look at this question: ¿Qué haces? Here on page 72. ¿Qué haces? What do you do? Remember the verb hacer is very important, to do or make. What do you do? What do you do during the day? ¿Qué haces durante el día? And they give people engaged in different activities. So look at them. Look at the first one here. Mirar la televisión, to watch TV. Asistir a clase. Asistir a clase. Asistir has nothing to do with assist. It means to attend. And it's always followed by the preposition a. Yo asisto a clase. I attend class. Practicar el fútbol. To practice soccer. Leer, the verb to read. El periódico. Periódico. Leer el periódico is to read the newspaper. Hablar por teléfono, to speak on the phone. These are basic daily activities many of us engage in. Estudiar, to study. Estudiar en la biblioteca. Trabajar, good verb to know. You should be aware of it and be able to use it when you talk about yourself. Yo trabajo a las 10. Comer, to eat. Yo como con mi familia. Cantar, to sing. Yo canto en el coro. Coro is a chorus. So just familiarize yourself with these activities. You're going to be called on to use them in your exam. Desayunar, there it is, to have breakfast. Again, now I am on page 73. Please look at these activities. Almorzar, to have lunch. Cenar, to have dinner. Bailar, to dance. Ir, to go. Remember the verb ir, to go to the beach. Ir al cine. The cine is the cinema, to go to the movies. Ir al cine. Or you might like to go shopping. How do you say to go shopping? Well, to go is ir, and then de compras. Correr is another activity. Practicar yoga. Montar a caballo, to ride a horse or go horseback riding. And jugar basketball. Okay. Or baloncesto is another way to say it. And here's some more phrases. Again, look through these. Dormir, to sleep. Jugar videojuegos, to play video games. Leer, to read. Usar la computadora. Okay, to use the computer. So just familiarize yourselves with these terms. You will need to be able to talk about yourself and others. And things you or somebody might like to do. Okay. All right. Let's take a look here. And give me a second. There are some more things I would like to bring up. Okay. You need to know the days of the week. They're never capitalized, nor are the months. And just make sure you know the days of the week, okay? Or the weekdays would be los días entre semana, within the week, okay? The weekdays. And here they are: lunes, Monday, martes, Tuesday, miércoles, Wednesday, jueves, Thursday, and viernes, Friday. And then what about the weekend? How do you say weekend? Well, the word for week is semana. The end is fin. So the weekend is el fin de semana, literally the end of week. Okay. And the weekend days are Saturday, Sábado, and Domingo, Sunday. Okay. Now this is an important thing. I wanted to point it out. How do you say on in a day of the week? Now, one way to say on is the preposition en, but we never use en with the day of a week. Never. So how do we say on then? We use the definite article. The days of the week are masculine. So el lunes means on Monday. El jueves means on Thursday. That's how we say it, and it's the only way. Now, what if we want to say on Mondays or on Tuesdays when it's something that happens regularly, every Monday, every Tuesday, on Mondays, on Tuesdays? Use the plural definite article. So now it becomes los lunes, means every Monday or on Mondays. Los martes means on Tuesdays or every Tuesday. Okay, I wanted to point that out because it's part of speaking and expressing yourself in Spanish. Very important. Okay, so you should be able to talk about different activities and the days on which you do those activities and the times at which you do those activities. So I could say, yo um, uh, estudio español los martes a las 5 de la tarde. Now, I told you what I do, the days on which I do it, and the time at which I do it. Okay? So be prepared to do that. Okay, let's move on to estructura on page 77. This is our grammar section. And in this chapter, we're going to learn how to conjugate regular verbs in the present tense. Up until now, we've learned irregular verbs. You had to memorize them, okay? You had to memorize the verb ser, for example, to be, the verb estar, the other verb to be, tener is irregular. But let's look at regular verbs and let's see how we conjugate them. Okay, so we're going to look at, and this is on page 76, and I also have a video lecture on this. Please go through it. But you should all by now be able to conjugate any regular verb in Spanish in the present tense with the subject pronouns. What are the subject pronouns? Yo, I, tú, familiar you, él, he, ella, she, usted, the formal you. And then the plural subject pronouns, nosotros, we, and then ellos, they, and ustedes, the plural you. Vosotros, we don't use. Okay, so when you're given one of those subject pronouns, you should know how to conjugate the verb and match it correctly or conjugate it correctly with the subject pronoun. Okay, and that's what this lesson is about. So remember, in Spanish, there are 3 classifications of verbs. The verbs either end in AR, ER, or IR, and that's what they're showing you here on page 78, okay? And they're giving you an example how to do an AR, ER, and IR verb, and you should know how to conjugate verbs. Okay, so in English, we don't have this. Verbs can end in anything, but in Spanish, we have these different classifications, which is a godsend, because now, once we know whether we have an AR, ER, IR verb, we know now how to conjugate it, because AR verbs conjugate a little differently than ER and IR verbs. And you can learn the rules to do this, and it's very simple. Once you internalize them, no problem. So how do you conjugate a verb in Spanish? Real quickly, you get the stem of the verb. How do you get the stem of the verb? You drop the AR, ER, or IR ending. Anyone could do this. That's all you do. You get the stem. Once you have the stem of the verb, then you put on the ending. And there's universal, never-changing, God-given endings. You must memorize these. But once you do, this is easy as cake, okay? Each subject pronoun requires a specific ending, okay? AR verbs have their endings, ER verbs have their endings, IR verbs have their endings. Okay, and once you internalize these endings, you can conjugate any regular verb in Spanish, even if you don't know what it means. You can correctly conjugate it with a subject pronoun. So let's take a look at this. So I want to see here if your book goes through this with you, and they conjugate verbs. So let's go and just move on to, they describe the subject pronouns. Again, you need to spend a little time on these sections if you like, but let's just move on. And there's presentations on conjugating AR, ER, and IR verbs. You can spend time with those, and you should have by now. But let's take a look here. And I want to take us to, give me a second. I'm going to jump ahead now to page 81, and give me a second. Okay, and let's see here. Give me a sec. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I'm going to page 82. 82. So here I like this chart because it shows you what endings AR verbs take, ER verbs take, and IR verbs take. So let's take a look. And these are with the singular subject pronouns, so let's take a look. All right, so what ending, once, so the first example here is they're going to do, let's do the verb trabajar. That's our AR verb, leer is our ER verb, and vivir is our IR verb. So if your subject pronoun is yo and your verb is trabajar, what do we do to conjugate it? We drop the AR ending and we get trabaj. And then what is the universal God-given ending that always matches or goes with the subject pronoun yo? It's o. So trabajo. Trabajo is where I say I work or I am working. What about leer? To conjugate leer, we drop the ER ending and we get le. Again, what is the ending that always goes on ER verbs when the subject pronoun is yo? It's o. So yo leo, I read or I am reading. What about vivir? I want to conjugate it with yo, so I drop the IR ending and I get the stem viv. What ending goes with yo? When I have an IR verb, it's an o again. So vivo means I live or I'm living. What about tu? Okay. So if if the subject pronoun is tu, it's going to affect the ending. So how would I use, what ending do I put on an AR verb when the subject is tu? Well, if the verb is trabajar and I have an AR verb, I get the stem trabaj and I put on an AS ending. Trabajas, tu trabajas. You work or you are working. I put an AS ending. But what if I'm sorry, if I have an ER and IR verb, then I get the stem of the ER and IR verb, and what magical ending do I put? It's the same for both. It's ES. So tu lees, the two E's kind of collide together or allied together. Tu lees, you read or you are reading. Tu vives, okay, you are living. Finally, what if I have a he, she, it, usted form? Well, for trabajar, what if I have an AR verb? Okay, I get my stem and I add an A. El trabaja. What about an ER and IR verb? Well, I add an E. So, él lee y él vive. Okay, so just look at that chart. Your book, for some reason, divides the verbs up into the singular. Well, here now they do the plural subject pronouns, nosotros, forget about vosotros, and then ellos and ustedes. So what do we do when we have the plural subject pronouns? Again, whatever the verb is, we drop the AR, ER, and IR ending, and then there's special endings that AR verbs take, ER verbs take and IR verbs. Let's take a quick look at this. So what if nosotros is our subject pronoun and I'm doing cenar, to have dinner? Well, how do I get the stem of cenar? I got to get the stem first. I drop the AR and I get sen. What is the ending that goes with nosotros? It's amos. It's in your book. Learn it, internalize it. Now, what if I have an ER verb like comer, to eat, and I want to conjugate it with nosotros? I got to get the stem of comer, so it's com. What's the ending? It's hemos, not amos, but hemos. Make sure that you make that distinction. Nosotros comemos, we are eating. Finally, what if I have an IR verb and I want to conjugate it with nosotros? I got to get the stem, so I'm going to take vivir, so the stem is viv. What is the ending that always is universal, never changing, that goes with nosotros when I have an IR verb? It's imos. Be very careful. It's IMOS, vivimos. And then finally, let's look at ellos or ustedes. They both conjugate the same way. So if I have an AR verb like cenar, what ending do I put on the stem? Sen, an, cenan. Ellos cenan. What if it's comer? I have an ER verb and I want to say ellos and they eat. It would be ellos comen, en ending. And then finally, what if I have an IR verb? They live, so vivir is live, the stem is viva. So ellos viven. En is your ending. So please learn these endings. Okay, learn the endings that go with each subject pronoun. When the verb is an AR verb, an ER verb, and an IR verb, do a few of these. This is very simple, and you need to spend a little bit of time with it and get comfortable with it. And I did do a video on this, and we shouldn't have to spend a whole lot of time on this. Okay, now give me a second. And let's see where you're. Okay. Let's see. By the way, please pay attention here to this. Let's see. Give me a second. I wanted to point out some things here. Okay. And on page 85, and I did mention this in your study guide, take a look at cultura. There's always something on culture on your exams, and just look at this description of coffee growing, coffee culture in Central America and in Nicaragua and El Salvador, and the linkages to the US. Just take a look at that. And that's on page 89. And then now let's jump ahead to the another area of grammar, to Estructura 3.3 on page 86. Let me see if I can call it up here. Okay. Okay. This has to do with stem changing verbs. Okay. So remember I told you when you conjugate a verb in Spanish, you have to get the stem. We all know how to do that. There's three types of verbs, AR, ER, and IR. To get the stem, you drop the AR, ER, or IR of the stem. Okay. And I'm sorry, of the infinitive. Okay. The AR, ER, IR form is the infinitive or to form of the verb. Okay. So if we have the verb trabajar, the AR form means to work. For cenar, to have, it means to have dinner. It's the to form of the verb in English, or we call it the infinitive. So we drop the AR, ER, and IR of the infinitive and we get our stem. That's normally how we conjugate a verb. And then each subject pronoun requires a special ending. You should know those endings now for AR, ER, and IR verbs. Now there's one other wrinkle here, and certain verbs have a change in their stem. So they're going to have two stems. They're going to have the first stem when you drop the AR, ER, and IR. Everyone knows how to form that. But they're going to have a second stem now. And you need to know how to form the stem. And we're going to learn one class of stem changing verbs. There's two other classes we'll learn in chapter 4. In chapter 3, please note just this class of stem changing verbs. These are verbs that have an O in their stem, and in their second stem, the O will change to UE. Okay? And by the way, stem changing verbs conjugate in terms of endings, just like regular AR, ER, and IR verbs. You just put the regular endings on that match the subject pronouns. Okay, the only thing that changes with these is they are going to show a stem change. So let's take a look real quickly at these verbs. Okay, and give me a second here. Let's see. Okay. All right. So let's look at the verb poder. Okay. Poder means to be able to or can. Okay. English is a very awkward way of using this verb. It means can. Okay. But in English, in its infinitive form, we say to be able to. In Spanish, it's poder. Notice that the stem of this verb, if we drop the ER, is pod. Everyone should see that. But it shows us that in the stem, there's the O of the stem goes to UE. It changes, and now we get a new stem, P-U-E-D, pueda. Okay, everybody see that? And so let's take a look and see how we conjugate it. So for stem changing verbs, whenever it is a stem changing verb, there'll be two stems. And the stem that we're going to use the most when conjugating is the stem with the stem change. So we're not going to be using pod much, but we are going to be using pued. Okay, and let's see how this works. So let's conjugate it. Yo pued. All right, so yo always takes the stem change, so it's yo pued, not yo pod, but yo pued. What is the ending that goes with ER verbs when the subject pronoun is yo? It's o, puedo, I can. What about tu? What about tu? Tu always requires a stem change, pued. What ending always goes with ER verbs when the subject pronoun is tu? It's yes, so tu puedes. And finally, what about él or ella? It always has a stem change. El, ella, and usted always have a stem change, so the stem is puede. What's the ending that goes with el, ella, or usted? With an ER verb, it's an E, puede. What about nosotros? They didn't write it here, but there is no stem change for nosotros. The stem is pod. They did not give it, it's pod, P-O-D. And so that's why I say stem changing verbs have two stems. The yo, the tu, the el have to have a stem change, puede, but nosotros form, the nosotros form never has a stem change. You use the original stem pod. The same for vosotros, by the way. Finally, what about ustedes or ellos? There is a stem change. So it's ellos puede. So let's finish this one. So if we want to say nosotros, the stem is pod. Nosotros, pod. It's an ER verb. What ending goes with ER verbs for nosotros? EMOS. Nosotros podemos. Ellos always takes a stem change. Ustedes always takes a stem. So it's going to be puede. What ending goes with ustedes or ellos? It's en pueden. So let's take a look at this. So yo puedo means I can. Tú puedes means you can. Él puede means he can. Nosotros podemos means we can. And ellos pueden means they can. All right. So now we've seen how stem changers work. We learned a stem changer, and I did a presentation on this in video lectures, and you can go through it, and it's all explained here. But let's take a look at some more of these verbs. You should know what they mean. They are other verbs that have O's in their stems that undergo a stem change. So we have almorzar, to have lunch. The stem is almorz, and the new stem is almuerz. Dormir, very important verb, to sleep. The first stem is dorm, and the new stem is duerm. Soñar is to dream. The first stem is soña, and the second stem is sueña. Okay. Make sure that you are familiar with these verbs, that you know what they mean, and that you can conjugate them. And again, I invite you to look at the video lecture on conjugating these verbs. Okay. And then finally, the chapter ends with on page 89, where you read an horario or a schedule. And again, if you are going to ask somebody questions about their daily routine or their schedule, their horario, you're going to ask a qué hora es, at what time is the event, all right? And you will always answer back with an a, okay? And so they do, give me a second. See if here we are in 3.4, and they just give us a typical schedule of a student, and they ask us some questions. And finally, look that over. And then finally, make sure that you know how to work on the bottom of page 90. Look at this chart. Also look at the study guide that I've provided. Make sure you know your demonstrative adjectives. And that means, what are just demonstrative adjectives? It's how the way we say this, these, that, those. This house, these houses, okay? That house, those houses. This, okay? Or these, that, and those. Okay, make sure you know how to say that. Now, these are adjectives. They're called demonstrative adjectives that everyone knows, and I've harped on this a lot. You need to be aware of the gender of the thing you're referring to, because they're adjectives. So you have to tweak these demonstrative adjectives, whether they're whether the noun or nouns they're modifying are masculine or feminine, singular or plural. It's very easy, but you have to spend a little time on it and look at it. Let's take a look. First of all, we use this and these when an object is close to us. We use that and those when an object is distant from us. You will be tested on this. So if the object is close to you, you're going to be using this and these. If the object is distant, you're going to be that and those. Okay, that's just basic to English as well. Now, how do we say this and these? So if we want to say this book, there it is. Libro is masculine. So if the thing you're talking about is close to you and it's masculine, you say este libro. Okay. What if the thing is plural? You want to say these books. Now you say estos libros. They're close to you. Okay. Now, what if you want the thing is far away from you and it's masculine? You say ese, E-S-E, ese libro. Okay, that book. All right. And then what if the thing is far away from you? What if it's far away from you? You say esos libros, those books. What if the thing you're talking about is feminine and it's close to you and you want to say this class, esta clase, clase is feminine. What if it's plural and you want to say these classes? Again, the class is close to you. You would say estas clases. Now, what if the classes, you're talking about that class way over there? It will be esa clase, and those classes would be esas clases. So take a look at that and make sure that you can work with these. They're fairly simple and they're logical. Just remember that they are adjectives, they're demonstrative adjectives. So you must be aware of the gender and number of whatever you're talking about. All right, and tweak your adjective accordingly. So I think that's about does it. Please take a look at the study guide. I think it's pretty thorough. And take a look at the also take a look at the video lectures. And I think that should do it for this evening.